Florida's natural premium orange juice is made just from our fresh oranges, not from concentrate. We own the land, the trees, and the company. Florida's natural. It's as close to the grove as you can get.
Your pet's same exact heartworm and flea medications delivered to your home, saving you time and money. 1-800-PET-MEDS. We deliver savings and convenience on HeartGuard, Advantage, Frontline, and all other pet medications. Call to order now or order online.
CNN Tonight, the march towards Baghdad. We're live from the front lines, the risks facing reporters in the field, in the midst of battle with the troops, plus ambassadors from Kuwait, Turkey, and more. Only on Larry King, CNN Tonight, 9 Eastern.
Good morning. You're looking at a live picture of Baghdad. Still lots of columns of black smoke blanketing the city. We are told, and you're just looking at a small quadrant of the city, the Iraqis have actually dug wells and lighted oil to create this huge black blanket over the city to try to obscure some of the weapons that might be dropped on Iraq later on in this rolling shock and awe campaign. Good morning. It's Sunday, March 23rd, 10 a.m. on the East Coast, 7 a.m. on the western or in the western U.S., 6 p.m. in Iraq. This is the fourth day of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Paula Zahn in New York. Joining me are my colleagues Bill Hemmer in Kuwait City and Leon Harris in Atlanta, who gets things started with a look at what is happening at this hour. And what an hour it is. Leon, good morning.
It certainly is. Things starting to move quite a bit now. Missing pilots or theatrical propaganda. Iraqi soldiers firing into the Tigris River amid Arab media reports that a coalition plane went down over Baghdad. The coalition leaders are dismissing these reports, saying that all planes and pilots are accounted for. The coalition forces do say a U.S. Patriot missile battery may have brought down a Royal Air Force aircraft. This near the Iraq-Kuwait border. This plane was returning from a mission in Iraq. The anti-missile rocket can sometimes be used against aircraft, but there are no details on what might have gone wrong in this instance. The plane's crew is missing at this hour. Now, we have this developing story coming into us right now from CNN's Walter Rogers. He's embedded with the 7th U.S. Cavalry in south-central Iraq. We'll get to that in just a bit. Let's go back to Paula, standing by in New York. Paula.
And in fact, that's exactly where we're going, Leon. Back to Walt Rogers, who is with the 307th Cavalry. The last time we spoke with Walt, he was literally 75 meters away from some incoming Iraqi fire. Walt, what's the very latest from there now? I understand you can tell us you're someplace in south-central Iraq. We're going to take one more attempt at this. Walt Rogers joining us just about 15 minutes ago when he described being at the receiving end with the 307th Cavalry of a large blast of Iraqi artillery. And he explained this process of how the coalition tanks dispersed in 30 seconds and got into defensive positions. Let's see if we can get Walt back on the line again. Walt, can you hear me now? Now, what he described to me was that he thought that what was coming out them was from a multiple launch rocket. At that point, there had been no evidence of soldiers injured, but it was very hard from that perspective to see because of all of the tanks involved. He said no vehicles were disabled. He went on to explain that one thing that they saw was kind of curious were a lot of villagers walking alongside the road holding up white flags, and now it is his belief that one of them might have been a forward observer giving cues to those Iraqi troops. We're going to kind of get back to him. He did describe, though, that the artillery seemed to be fired with considerable accuracy. I think we got Barbara Starr standing by at the Pentagon. She's not ready. Let's go to Tom Mentir then at CENTCOM headquarters in Qatar. Tom, there's a lot to talk about this morning. First off, why don't we talk about the reports of now the leading U.S. commander saying that as many as 10 American soldiers may be missing someplace in southern Iraq. Is there anything that you can tell us about that?
We cannot give you any confirmation here from CENTCOM. We may hear later on in a few hours when they do conduct a briefing. What we have learned here overnight is that a British Royal British aircraft, the Tornado, was listed as missing throughout the evening hours and overnight. And this morning, the British officials here confirmed that they feared it had been shot down as it crossed the border from a mission in southern Iraq back into Kuwait by an American Patriot missile battery. Apparently a major case of friendly fire. Excuse me, that this aircraft indeed was brought down by a Patriot missile. They have not found the crew yet. They are still conducting search and rescue operations, but they have identified it as a Tornado aircraft, and the British are saying that it was brought down by a Patriot missile. An investigation is indeed underway.
Tom, we'd love you to stand by, and we now think we do have that Walt Rogers line set up once again. It only dropped because he was once again enduring some Iraqi artillery fire. Walt, are you with us? And if you are, you can go back to the beginning and tell us what it is you have experienced today with the 307th Cavalry. Walt, can you hear us now?
Yes, Paul, I'm sorry I had to bail out on you, but there was a cry of incoming, and we all had to dive in a ditch. And when we dived in the ditch, I lost the line. The story here at this moment is that within the last hour, the Iraqis fired a very accurate artillery barrage on the 3rd Squadron, 7th Cavalry. One U.S. Army sergeant was injured by shrapnel. He has been medevaced. He is said to be in stable and not life-threatening condition. So there was one soldier wounded in that artillery barrage I reported an hour or so ago. 6 or so artillery shells fell in a very tight pattern. The Iraqis knew exactly where the 7th Cavalry was at that point. And then about 20 minutes later, perhaps 30 minutes later, the Iraqis fired 3 more shells in the same general vicinity. By that time, the 7th Cavalry had dispersed. There was very little chance of them hitting anything on that second volley of artillery shells that came in. I saw the second volley fall about 150 yards away, 150 meters away. The first volley, however, was much closer. That those half a dozen shells which injured the American soldier, the sergeant, fell within less than a football length field of me. I went back, checked. They were about 60 to 75 yards away from where I was standing. 6 shells, very tight pattern. The Iraqis knew exactly where to fire. And what I suspect, what each of us now strongly suspects happens, is that when the Iraqi civilians walk up and down the road with a flag of surrender waving to the soldiers, at least one of those Iraqi civilians pretending to be friendly carrying a white flag was almost certainly a forward combat observer, because the Iraqis knew exactly where the 7th Cavalry was at the time. Paula?
Well, we're going to leave it there and let you explain to us how quickly all these tanks were able to disperse, I guess, in 30 seconds or so. Thanks for the update. More breaking news now. Bill Hemmer will take us through it. Bill?
Yeah, Paul, Alessio Vinci of CNN embedded with the U.S. Marines moving through the southern town of Nasiriyah. Reports we're getting right now of Marine casualties in the battlefield. Not sure what the description we have, but Alessio is there and joins us. Alessio, what do you have?
Well, Bill, a significant change from our last report a couple of hours ago. The company of Marines that was actually ahead of ours a couple of hours ago came under heavy fire from Iraqi forces just outside the town of Nasiriyah, and I can report at this time that we do have the U.S. forces suffered a significant number of casualties. We're still trying to establish the precise number, but as you can imagine, this accident took place just within the last couple of hours. We just arrived here on the scene of the attack, and we're trying to establish with some of the sources and some of the eyewitnesses here, since some other reporters embedded with that company are trying to give us a little bit of details about exactly what happened. But by just describing you what I'm looking at, the Charge AAV, an amphibious assault vehicle, it's basically one of those armored personnel carriers that the Marines are using, and it is totally destroyed. It's totally charcoal, burned down, and according to one of the eyewitnesses, this was one of the armored that was hit by a rocket-propelled grenade. Now, all this happened several hundreds of meters ahead of me. You remember I was reporting earlier on, hearing heavy gunfires, heavy fire. I was not in a position that I could see it, but this indeed, I've now managed to push myself forward a little bit, and I am looking here right now at this totally destroyed and burned out shell of an armored personnel carrier of the U.S. United States Marines. Again, significant number of casualties, more than 10, I would say, but we're still trying to assess the correct number, Bill.
Yeah, Alessio, a couple things here. I'm not sure how much more you can tell us, but let's back up a little bit. We talked to you about 2 hours ago. At that time, you said there was light fire and light resistance. Can you tell us what changed since then? And had you been with this unit the entire time, or was this from a different Marine unit?
Well, that is correct. This is an entire battalion that comprises of several different companies and several different units. And the unit that I was with was a unit, sort of, if you want, the second in the line to go through the town of Nasiriyah. And so we were only experiencing some light fire, but in the distance I could hear the explosion of heavier guns, but obviously I was not aware of what was going on until I arrived here, until we managed to cross the two bridges that separate one side from the other, the north side from the south side of the town. And when I arrived here, obviously the scene completely different from the one back in town where we were, where again we only suffered some light fire, but here obviously the unit that spearheaded, if you want, the drive through Nasiriyah obviously got the worst, and they was the worst hit. It is obviously very difficult for me now to assess exactly what happened in terms of how come that these Marines, with the incredible amount of air power and air cover that there was at the time, throughout this operation this morning, I saw at least 6 Cobra helicopters with machine guns mounted on them, hovering over the entire area, so a significant amount of air cover. Yet some of the Iraqi forces who had RPGs managed to inflict severe casualties, at least in the first unit, and I would say only in this first unit of Marines, as opposed to the units that were following behind, who only got hit with light fire, Bill.
Yeah, and Alessio, this amphibious assault vehicle that you're describing, this AAV, as they call it in the military, otherwise known as an Amtrak, it is a significant piece of military hardware. It weighs many, many tons. Is it possible that one rocket-propelled grenade could inflict this much damage? That's my first question. And while I have you here also, when you say at least 10 Marines may have been affected by this, does that indicate that this amphibious assault vehicle was actually transporting Marines through Nasiriyah at the time?
Well, to answer the latter part of the question, yes, these vehicles are used to transport the troops. As a matter of fact, it is the same identical vehicle that we, the embedded journalists, are traveling with. We are indeed traveling inside these vehicles alongside the Marines. It is the preferred mean of infantry transportation, if you want, for these Marines. As far as the capacity of an RPG, yes, you're right. This is a significant piece of metal, but it is also meant to float. This is, of course, a vehicle that is used also for amphibious assault, so it is not made of pure steel, and it does not have, if you want, the metal plates that would protect it against this kind of fire. So I was just talking to one of the reporters, as a matter of fact, who witnessed part of the scene, because he was indeed embedded with that unit that came under fire, and he said that basically he witnessed some of those shells going through the AAV, the amphibious vehicle, like a knife through melting butter. So indeed a significant piece of equipment, but also very vulnerable to close fire, and especially to a rocket-propelled grenade, especially designed to stop this kind of vehicles, Bill.
All right, Alessio, thanks. Alessio Vinci traveling with the U.S. Marines, and again, as he's reporting, an amphibious assault vehicle took on fire, possibly from a rocket-propelled grenade, and there are casualties, exact numbers not known right now, but as we get them, we'll pass them along to you. Certainly this has to be quite disturbing news to the Pentagon yet again, and for the families watching to these reports that we're getting fresh and direct from the field of battle with our embedded journalists. Paula?
It's the kind of news we hate to report, the kind we fear we have to report. More of that kind of news to talk about with Barbara Starr, who's live from the Pentagon right now. First off, let's talk about all of the news that has been made on the Sunday talk shows this morning. General Myers on a Fox show saying as many as 10 American soldiers may be unaccounted for in southern Iraq. What do you have on that?
Indeed, Paula, is shaping up to be a very difficult Sunday morning here at the Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense began by saying on one Sunday talk show that he believed there were missing soldiers in Iraq, missing U.S. soldiers unaccounted for, and then General Richard Myers, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, spoke to reporters after another appearance that he made on a talk show. Let's listen very quickly to what he had to say.
I think there are some Americans that are missing. We think it's less than 10. Central Command is doing the investigation to find out exactly where they might be and what might be the circumstances around that. But
officials here are only willing to go so far as what General Myers said. There are a number of reports swirling around. Nothing has been confirmed here beyond what General Myers has said, and that is that the top leadership believes that there are a number, somewhat less than 10, U.S. soldiers unaccounted for on the battlefield today in south central Iraq. Officials here, I can tell you, and officials at the Central Command out in the Persian Gulf are trying very urgently to determine the exact circumstances of what may be going on. Paula?
All right, now we should explain that our own Wolf Blitzer will have a one-on-one interview with Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld in our noon hour, but we need to go through some of the other news he made on other shows this morning. On NBC, when asked if he believed there were American prisoners of war, he said, quote, "There could be." Can you tell us more about that?
That statement, Paula, also caught officials here by some surprise. We think it is possible that he was then referring to what General Myers then said, this apparent view here at the Pentagon that there are soldiers unaccounted for. In these types of circumstances, what they try and do is mount immediate reconnaissance rescue missions on the ground, in the air, see if they can look out ahead on the battlefield, see any indication of where people might be. They try very urgently to do this as soon as they find out someone may be unaccounted for, before they can be, if they are captured, before they can be moved by enemy forces to another location. So the situation very murky, very cloudy here. That may be what the Secretary was referring to.
And let's review that rather bizarre scene we saw unfold on television in our 7 o'clock Eastern Time hour this morning when we saw Iraqi soldiers firing shots into the Tigris River. We saw little fishing vessels crisscrossing the river. We saw brush being set on fire alongside the riverbank, all apparently, according to the Iraqis, to enhance their search for what they say were 2 downed pilots. Now, we're going to stay on this picture. It is notable to mention that on NBC today, that Secretary Rumsfeld said he had heard that an Allied aircraft was missing, but he had no information about claims by Iraq that 2 Western pilots had been forced to abandon their aircraft. Here is his exact quote. There had been a report of an aircraft that's missing, but he did not clarify whether that was a U.S. plane or a British plane. Is there any clarification here as to what he was referring to?
Not exactly. Another murky situation. Now, about 8:30 this morning, Washington time, the Central Command put out a statement saying that all coalition aircrews pilots had returned safely, that there was no one unaccounted for. That is because these pictures that you're looking at made their way around the world and really were quite riveting and caused a massive amount of consternation. It is very unusual for the military to put out that type of statement because they don't want to be boxed into a corner. If there was to be someone down over enemy territory, they never say anything about it while they're making every effort in those initial moments and hours to get someone back if a rescue mission is underway. So they don't like to set the precedent of even talking about it. Quite unusual that they would put out a very quick, immediate statement saying that everyone, all air crews were fine according to their information. At this point, there is nothing to indicate at this point that any of that has changed.
Barbara Starr, thanks so much. It's also interesting, and we'll get back to you in a little bit, also interesting to note that in that same NBC interview, Secretary Rumsfeld suggested that this all had been staged for, as Barbara has described before this morning, for propaganda purposes to show the possibility of American casualties. I do need to make one note before we move on. Suzanne Malveaux Just reporting from the White House now, even though the president has stayed out of sight today, the news has been shared with him of the missing U.S. soldiers in Iraq. The president so far today has received 2 briefings, one with CIA Director George Tenet, another with Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld. And Defense Secretary Rumsfeld will be joining Wolf Blitzer on our special late edition today at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, right here on CNN. We turn now to our own Bob Franken. He is at an air base where search and rescue missions have been launched today. Bob, what can you tell us?
Well, Paula, a lot of it is shrouded in secrecy, still classified, but what we can tell you is that the search and rescue unit here, they call themselves the 911 of the Air Force, has had an extremely busy day. One unit in particular was rousted out at 4:35 in the morning. That is 8:35 the evening before in Washington and on the East Coast. They, in fact, were sent out on a search and rescue mission. It is roughly the time that word came out about a British Royal Air Force plane that went down. We were told by the pilots that although they can't tell us the result of their mission, they switched from that one to a second one. During that second one, according to the pilots, one of the men went to the ground. He came under small arms fire, he said, but that mission had been a success. No details. Again, they cite classified information. The same crew, very busy, went to a third search and rescue mission. That one, we have not been able to get complete information, and the information we have, we are again under the restrictions that bind us here, are not allowed to report. So there have obviously been big needs today for search and rescue missions at the very same time that you can see at the airfield that it's busy again. In the 24-hour reporting period that ended locally this morning and last night on the East Coast, there were 296 separate missions that were flown from here. That was up from the 250 of the day before, way up from the 141 of the day before that. So you can see that the air war is intensifying, but also some of the problems are intensifying as more traffic in the air means that there are just more opportunities for the Iraqis to try and take action against the U.S. pilots and the members of the coalition. Paula?
Bob, the other question I have for you today, it's hard to tell how quickly news drifts from the Sunday talk shows to where you are, but has there been any talk of the confirmation now that has come from U.S. military leaders that no more than 10 American soldiers may be missing at this hour someplace in southern Iraq? Is that anything that's been talked about there?
Well, it's only something that people who hear the news, and they can watch it on television, the people who hear the news then start thinking that, well, maybe some of these search and rescue missions involve the people that were being talked about on the talk shows. But has there been any official confirmation? No. As a matter of fact, news has been very, very slow to filter out of the Air Force on these matters.
Bob Franken, thanks so much. We'll be getting back to you throughout the day. Back to Bill Hemmer now in Kuwait City. Bill?
Yeah, Paula, we've been tracking the movements of our chief international correspondent, Christiane Amanpour. Yesterday, she was in southeastern Iraq with the British. She's still with the British, but now back in Kuwait. Let's pick up things tonight now when night has fallen here in Kuwait to find out what's happening with her now. Christiane, good evening.
Well, Bill, good evening. We've been watching the sort of strategic targeting around the southern Iraqi area. Today, we were in the Rumaila oil fields in southern Iraq, and what we were told and what we saw was that at least the area we were in was secured, and what they've told us is they have secured the Rumaila oil fields, and that was a very early and important strategic target for them.
At war, would the Iraqi regime resort to a scorched earth policy? Would it torch its own oil fields, as US and British officials insisted? That was the big question. And to be sure, close up, any oil well fire looks catastrophic. But in fact, only 7 of about 500 wells in the Rumaila oil field, Iraq's biggest, have been set ablaze.
In the end, there was effectively nothing at all, which was, for us, very reassuring, but we actually obviously had to work on worst case.
So just hours after the ground invasion began, US Marines raced to secure these fields in southern Iraq, followed closely by British Royal Engineers and explosive experts.
This wasn't a little sideshow in the operation. This was a critical part of the coalition operation. Whatever the future form that Iraq takes, I mean, pervasive in that is its oil and its oil income.
Indeed, this field in the south produces 60% of Iraq's oil, and everyone remembers the ecological and environmental havoc Iraq caused by setting Kuwait's oil fields ablaze 12 years ago. In a futile attempt to obscure the vision of invading US and British forces, the Iraqis did fill some trenches with oil around key installations. Some of those trenches they set on fire. And now there is a fairly strong smell of oil in the air. But according to the British Royal Engineers here, there is no evidence yet of any attempts by the Iraqis to booby-trap or cause serious sabotage. Army engineers discovered that by picking carefully through the critical gas and oil separation plants, shutting down valves and the big taps called manifolds. They are all off now, awaiting private contractors to restart the oil production. The Iraqi army put up some resistance and US Marines took some combat casualties. But here, as elsewhere in Iraq, many soldiers surrendered. The British say they have 500 POWs, and that number could grow to 1,000. And as they begin to secure large parts of the south, more troops and materiel pour in, pushing ever deeper up country. So southern Iraq was mainly and mostly about these strategic and economic targets. You've got the oil fields, which they say they've now secured. You've got the terminal, the Al-4 terminal, which they say they've also secured. But also Qasr, which you've been reporting a lot about, is still not controlled. And that is the commercial port that they need to bring humanitarian aid in. And this is a fluid situation. We were there yesterday. They had the port under control. Now it is still not fully under control of the US and British forces. And it's a litmus test because now we're waiting to see what's going to happen in Basra. At first there we were told that everything was quite quiet, the Iraqi divisions had melted away, and now we're being told that there is some resistance by those divisions, some of them who've melted away into the city and putting up some resistance around the city. So this is still a fluid situation in this area. Bill?
And Christian, I don't know if you were listening earlier today, the spokesman John Fines for the RAF in his briefing today really essentially bragged about the amount of cooperation that's happening now between the British and the U.S. in the air. I'm curious to know, are you seeing the similar cooperation on the ground between the British Royal Marines and the U.S. Marines or even the U.S. Army?
Yes, definitely. We have seen it in Al-4, we've seen it in Qasr, and also in the Rumaila oil fields. And they were sort of cooperating around Basra as well. The US have now peeled off towards Nasiriyah and Baghdad. That's their objective. But yes, there has been. I think importantly, though, we've been getting early briefings that everything's been going well, that Qasr had fallen earlier, we were told, you know, just hours after they had started to take it. And 2 days later, it's still not taken. So I think that there's still a very fluid situation in the southeastern part of this country in some of the key urban and strategic areas. Bill?
All right, Christian, thanks. Christian Amanpour, again, northern Kuwait with the British Royal Marines. Want to take you back several hours ago here in Kuwait, Camp Pennsylvania, in a tragic day for the 101st Airborne Division, 1st Brigade at Camp Pennsylvania. New videotape to show you after an incident involving a member of the 101st opening up a small arms fire and lobbing at least 2 grenades that exploded in and around the operations center at Camp Pennsylvania. As a result, 1 dead, a member of the 101st. 10 others wounded, some said to be wounded critically. They were medevaced out of the area, and 2 others on top of that wounded as well. Fortunately for them, they were treated and released. There is a suspect in custody. A suspect in custody right now being questioned by the U.S. Army, and no doubt an investigation is underway as to what happened here. There are some reports from Time Magazine reporters inside that camp that this was a disgruntled member of the 101st. He had been being tracked prior to this, and there was some speculation as to whether or not, had he been left behind and not gone forward into Iraq, that may be the reason why he was set off today. A lot of questions out there, no firm answers, but a suspect now is in custody. Again, all this happening 1:30 a.m. local time, early in the morning here at Camp Pennsylvania involving the 1st Brigade of the 101st Airborne Division. And Paula, you can imagine news travels fast. The 3rd Brigade of the 101st has moved on north into Iraq over the past 2 days. Ryan Chilcote, embedded with that group, reported to us earlier here at CNN that there were a lot of people who frankly had their morale dipped quite a bit after hearing news of this back south in Kuwait. Paula?
And it's having the same kind of effect on morale back home. Well, I had heard from George Heath from Fort Campbell earlier this morning, Bill, that was quoted as saying, death is a tragic incident regardless of how it comes, but when it comes from a fellow comrade, it does even more to hurt morale. We'll make sure that you keep us posted on all the continuing reaction to that horrible tragedy. Back now to what's coming out of the White House and White House staff. President Bush has been meeting with his War Council. In fact, he's had 2 briefings so far today, tracking developments in Iraq and planning some strategy. Our White House correspondent Suzanne Malveaux now joins us from her post at the Executive Mansion with the very latest. Suzanne, as I understand it from some of your early reporting, the president has been made aware of this report that perhaps as many as 10 American soldiers are missing in southern Iraq right now?
Well, yes, Paul, the president has gotten an update on the latest developments in Iraq, including the possibility of those soldiers who are missing. We are told that he's going to be getting briefings throughout the day. And as you know, he gets daily briefings, several briefings a day on the latest situation in Iraq. He is at Camp David right now. That's where yesterday he met with his full War Council and National Security Council. Today with him is National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice, as well as his Chief of Staff, Andy Card. Yesterday getting an update, progress on the ground. Today we were told that he received 2 early morning briefings, one a CIA briefing with George Tenet, the head of the CIA, as well as a defense briefing with Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, both of them through a secure video link. Also participating in those briefings, we were told the Vice President, Deputy Secretary of Defense Paul Wolfowitz, as well as the Vice Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Peter Pace. Now, the president is going to be returning to the White House later today. We are told this message just yesterday from the president in his radio address that there are a couple of things the administration is emphasizing here. First, while the president is certainly pleased and satisfied with the progress of the war that is taking place, they also want to give a warning, saying that one senior administration official saying this is not going to be a cakewalk here. That is something that the president warned Americans about just yesterday, saying perhaps it'll last a little bit longer than expected, that it is going to be a dangerous mission. And Paul, it seems today as if that has bared fruit.
Suzanne, we got to leave it there. Thanks so much. Eyes and ears for the world. We're going to hear from some of our many CNN reporters embedded with the U.S. military. Our coverage from the front lines continues. And a growing humanitarian crisis. Thousands of people fleeing Iraq. Our Jane Arraf has just returned from a refugee camp in the northern part of the country. She will update us on the conditions, as you can kind of see what they are, as the war continues. We leave you now as we head into the break with this nighttime shot of Baghdad. Our most recent contact with someone from Baghdad came from someone who served on the International Committee of the Red Cross. He's saying the black cloud that you're seeing in this very small sliver of picture here is pretty similar to what you're seeing across most of the horizon tonight. He said it is his belief from anywhere to 12 to 15 columns like this, and he was pretty darn sure this was the result of oil trenches the Iraqis have created in a ring surrounding the city that they set off to try to obscure coalition weapons, although we have heard from the American military that satellite weapons would not be all affected by this black haze. This black haze, enough of a problem, the Red Cross also reporting that people are complaining about some respiratory issues. We're going to take a short break. Our coverage continues right after that.
The war in Iraq continues, and no one takes you closer than CNN, live throughout the day. Stay with CNN, the most trusted name in news.
Hear what parents are saying about the most famous name in reading, Hooked on Phonics.
You should have seen him the first time he had one of the Hooked on Phonics books, and it meant something to him because he could actually read the words in it. He was running through the house. He was celebrating when his brother and sisters came home from playing outside. Look, wait a minute, sit down. I want to read this book to you.
With over 2 million families turning to Hooked on Phonics, it's the #1 reading system that's designed to give your child the head start he deserves. Presenting the newest version of Hooked on Phonics, now with 30 easy-to-use computer games to make learning fun. See an improvement in your child's reading in 4 weeks or your money back. Call in the next 10 minutes and receive National Geographic's 30 Memorable Years on 10 CD-ROMs, free with your order. Call now, 1-800-ABCDEFG, 1-800-ABCDEFG.
CNN, the most trusted name in news.
Hello, I'm Leon Harris at the CNN Center in Atlanta. At this hour, we have breaking news coming out of Iraq. Our Alessio Vinci, who's embedded with U.S. troops, is reporting that U.S. Marines apparently have suffered heavy casualties in fighting outside of the Iraqi city of An-Nasiriyah. He says the Marines were ambushed as they entered that area. We'll bring you some more information on this developing story as it comes into us here. Stay with us. Concerns about missing soldiers now in Iraq. There is word that authorities are searching for as many as 10 Americans who are unaccounted for right now. The search area said to be centered on southern Iraq, where coalition troops have been pushing forward toward Baghdad. Word of the search came from Air Force General Richard Myers during an appearance on a network talk show this morning. We're following this story closely, and we'll bring you more details as they come in on this story as well. Now, we have these pictures for you of Iraqis firing their machine guns into the river this morning, the Tigris River. This comes amid Arab media reports that a coalition pilot went down in Baghdad. However, U.S. and British officials said they have no information on any such crash and that all of their planes are accounted for at this hour. Now, here's a look at Baghdad. Live pictures you see of the skies over that city. Right now, no indication of any Allied bombing in the capital. But when change comes, you'll know it when you watch us right here. U.S. officials have vowed to keep up the pressure from the air as coalition forces roll through Iraq on the ground. At this hour, the U.S. 7th Cavalry is battling its way to Baghdad, coming up against stiff resistance in central Iraq. Our Walter Rogers, traveling with the troops, says members of the Iraqi Republican Guard in the area are using women and children as human shields. In southern Iraq, coalition forces have been mopping up pockets of resistance in Qasr. Allied troops claimed control of that strategic port city a few days ago, but they say Iraqi guerrillas put up an intense fight overnight. The Marines called in airstrikes and then captured prisoners of war. Officials say 9 oil wells are burning in Iraq's southern oil fields. Pentagon officials had been concerned that Iraqi forces would torch far more wells in an effort to slow the Allied advance. Officials say there's no evidence of any sabotage of oil wells in northern Iraq at this time. Coming up next hour, an enemy within the ranks. The Army says a soldier has been detained by his fellow troops. One of the latest on an intense investigation. And battling it out on the road to Baghdad, coalition forces face stiff resistance in a town that was reported to be secure. And as the war rages on, refugees battle the misery of hunger and cold. We'll take a closer look at the human toll of war. Stay with us. Now to Paula Zahn in New York. Paula.
Thanks so much, Leon. Walt Rogers has been keeping us riveting with his reporting this morning. He's with the Army 3rd Squadron, 7th Cavalry in southern Iraq, or actually south central Iraq, where the unit came under fire during the last hour. Walter, what's the very latest now?
Hello, Paula. For about the last 20 to 30 minutes, U.S. Air Force A-10 Warhogs have been bombing what are said to be suspected Iraqi artillery positions out in front of us. Not that far out in front of us, by the way, less than a mile. We can see the A-10s making passes coming in. The A-10 is much more effective when it can sweep in low over the ground. But the Iraqis have shoulder-fired missiles. They are using those against the A-10s and keeping the A-10s very high. We can see the A-10s flying over the suspected Iraqi artillery positions and drop their bombs, but immediately the A-10s are releasing flares behind them to divert and deflect Iraqi heat-seeking missiles, which are fired at them from the ground. The reason those suspected Iraqi artillery positions are being targeted is that about 2 hours ago we were reporting with more than a little accuracy that those Iraqis had found the the range and had a fairly good aim on the U.S. Army's 7th Cavalry. And they fired first a cluster of 6 artillery shells into the area in which the cavalry was assembled. The vehicles scrambled very, very quickly. Almost all soldiers were in their vehicles and gone within 30 seconds, reducing the target. CNN has since learned, however, that one U.S. Army sergeant was injured by shrapnel. He was medevaced out. He is said to be in stable condition, not life-threatening. And then a half hour after that, the Iraqis again began firing artillery in that very same area. This time, the first volley I was about 75 yards away from. The second volley was about 150 yards further up the road, and that volley fell where not long before a very long convoy of U.S. Army supply trucks, fuel trucks, had been sitting and had been assembled. They were dispersed. They were not there in any numbers when the artillery fell. I saw one soldier hustling across a wheat field with an M16 in his hand, trying to get out of there as the artillery was falling. But as I say, in these rounds that the Iraqis have been firing, to the best of our knowledge, only one staff sergeant injured by shrapnel, said to be in stable condition. Paula?
Well, you describe these A-10 Warthogs bombing artillery positions about a mile ahead of you. Now, that is something the military is trained to understand might happen. This is maybe perhaps your first exposure to that kind of bombing going on. How daunting is it?
I was in Sarajevo. It's what we're seeing is big explosions at the suspected artillery positions up the road. The more serious, precarious position we were in today was when the incoming was falling, as I say, about 75 yards, less than the length of a full football field off to my right. It was a very neat, tight pattern. By the way, since then, the U.S. Army has been firing its 120-millimeter mortars, again, forward over our heads. You can hear the mortars whistling right out over our heads, volleys, as they're going back in the direction of the artillery positions. I've heard artillery before. Paula?
Yeah, I know you're a veteran reporter and have covered a number of conflicts. Is your suspicion still that perhaps some of those villagers, the civilians you saw walk up along the side of the road waving white flags, suggest to you that they were giving cues to Iraqi soldiers, perhaps as forward observers?
Well, I should say that's an opinion that is not just mine, but I've since talked to a number of soldiers in Apache Troop. Each of them has the same suspicion that one of the Iraqis who walked up and down that road or walked down the road was somehow acting as a forward artillery observer because those shells were so neatly spaced and so very accurate in terms of falling right within a few meters of the U.S. Army's positions. Having said that, I talked with a soldier who was responsible for making sure that those Iraqis did not walk down the road and report back in. He said, to the best of his knowledge, only when an Iraqi civilian walked down the road, he was told he could not return, and they think they prevented anyone from walking out, taking the range of the U.S. position and walking back, but nobody's all that sure of that, given the accuracy of that volley, that artillery barrage, which we took within the last 2 hours. Paula?
Well, Rogers, thanks for putting that all into perspective, and I certainly did not mean to minimize all of the experience you've had covering various conflicts. Nevertheless, when you have A-10 Warthogs dropping bombs a mile in front of you to the rest of us, that probably would be pretty daunting. One other little factoid I wanted to mention, at one point you saw a picture of a pink pickup truck that the Iraqis apparently were using. We have since found out that on the windshield of the truck was an NYPD sticker. As the coalition war machine rolls across Iraq, thousands of people are scrambling to get out of the way, seeking safety wherever they can find it. Many of the refugees have ended up in camps in northern Iraq. Jane Arraf joins us now from the region with more on the growing concerns about a humanitarian crisis. Jane?
Paula, bombing quite close to here has convinced a lot of these people who have fled to the countryside and the mountains not to come back. Now today around noontime there was bombing at an Iraqi checkpoint about 3 miles from a village near where a lot of the refugees have come from. We went up to visit them. You can't really call it a tent city. What they've done is they've put up their own homemade tents in many cases, just pieces of plastic and sheets sort of sewn together, and they're sheltering there on the mountainside in this freezing mountain. They say they're afraid of chemical attack, afraid of the bombings, too afraid to go home again. But they're essentially in the cold and the rain. Children crammed into these tents. They're getting sick because the water supply is just a running stream. They really have no medical care. They have no heat. The tents have only small kerosene heaters that they've brought with them. Now, some of the luckier would-be refugees are being housed in schools and mosques. There they at least have some heat available. And government authorities here are making plans to house up to 100,000 if there is an expected influx, as they expect, from the rest of Iraq into the mountains. Paula?
So give us a sense of what they expect in the days come. How bad could this get?
It's really an interesting movement of people, because what we have been seeing in the past few days are not the refugees that officials had expected from the rest of Iraq, Iraqi government-controlled areas. Those have not fallen yet. What they're seeing are people who have fled cities like this one, leaving them practically deserted. So these are actually Kurds who are from villages not too far from where they're camping out. Now, some of the people have begun returning home. Authorities have said it's safe to go back to the major cities, and some of the men have begun to do so. But they've left a lot of the women and children behind, and certainly as this goes on and the weather continues to be cold, raining and freezing most nights, it will be a major problem. So the government here is beginning to get aid from international agencies, which will certainly help, and in the next few days we probably will see more formal tent cities springing up to better care for these refugees. Paula?
Jane Arraf, thanks so much. We'll be getting back to you a little bit later on today. Now let's go back to Kuwait City, where Bill is standing by. Bill, I haven't been able to ask you this all morning, but how much shock was there when this American GI was arrested for allegedly rolling grenades into a command tent?
Yeah, quite a bit, Paula. The news rippled through the 101st, not only in Kuwait, but also in Iraq. We heard one person on CNN several hours ago say, you know, we come halfway around the world, in his words, to fight the enemy, not to fight each other. And anytime this happens, it certainly sends a shock and a shrill through just about everyone involved here with the U.S. military. Word traveled fast. Many people said they were frankly disappointed. However, they will put this behind them, they say, and move forward with the objective, and that is, they say, to take on the Iraqis to the north. Speaking of Iraq, Paul, I want to show you a nighttime picture right now. It's just a bit before 7 o'clock in Baghdad. The nighttime picture, night has fallen. The street lights are still on. The electricity is still working, at least in many parts of the Iraqi capital. And the Pentagon has pointed out their briefings many times that the targets on the ground in Baghdad are not aimed to knock out the electricity or power in Baghdad. They say they want to keep a large portion of the infrastructure still intact. And they also point to the fact that bridges are still erected across the Tigris River in downtown Baghdad. Again, a bit before 7 o'clock local time in the evening, Sunday night, in Baghdad. Let's move away from the Iraqi capital now, get you out to the waters in the USS Lincoln, where CNN's Kira Phillips now checks in. We've heard from Kira off and on for the past 5 days. What's happening now, Kira? A bit loud earlier. Are they still flying at this point?
Oh, yeah, a lot still going on, Bill. Flight operations over Iraq continuing. Strike fighters launching and recovering off the USS Abraham Lincoln all through the day, all through the night. They continue to shape the battlefield for the troops on the ground, as they tell me. Now, one of the biggest concerns for pilots is the troops on the ground. When I talk to them, when they come back, they always say the adrenaline gets pumping because they're so concerned when they see the troops. So the purpose of today, mainly, two different purposes rather. Strike fighters dropping bombs on certain targets. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But forward air control, FAC operations, extremely important. Pilots launch over into Iraq, find out where the troops are, and basically provide protection. If the troops on the ground feel a threat is ahead, they will talk with the strike fighter pilots in the air. They will gather the pictures, the intelligence, and forward that on to other aircraft in the air. And if indeed it is a threat ahead, they will drop bombs on those targets. Other targets that they've been conducting bomb drops yesterday and today, leadership compounds, runways, air defense systems, command and control sites, a number of tanks and other facilities such as Republican Guard special operations warehouses. That took place yesterday. Hundreds of Tomahawk missiles continuing to be launched from destroyer squadrons in Iraq. Now, something else that has come up recently, and that is the threat of mines. Mines out here in the Persian Gulf. Earlier today, we heard from Captain Phil Green. He's a commander of one of the destroyer squadrons, and this is what he had to say.
We have faced a terrorist threat since we arrived in the Gulf. Threats from explosive-laden vessels, mines, and low, slow-flying aircraft continue today. Surface shotguns work closely with their respective carriers to support the vital surveillance effort.
So as you can see, there's a number of threats still out here in the Persian Gulf, not only on the ground in Iraq, the military tells me, but also out in the water. These vessels coming out of Iraq, they say, mine-laden, a number of explosives. Also the mines that exist out in the water. There are buoyant mines. There are mines laying at the bottom of the seabed. A lot of interesting vessels out here, including coalition vessels. We had a chance to spend some time on a British mine-hunting ship. Divers on board that actually go into the water, seek out these mines, and detonate them before they can cause any harm to civilians or other ships within the battle group. Bill?
Kira, a bit of the news of the day for you. The Iraqis say there is a downed pilot, a coalition pilot in Baghdad. No evidence to support that. The U.S. strongly denies that they're missing any pilots or aircraft. I mentioned earlier that word travels fast. Has it traveled there on the Lincoln?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked me about that, Bill. I've been working that story throughout the day also. I've been watching the pictures. Everybody's been watching that video, those video pictures via Iraq. The word here is there has been a count. All strike fighters, all aircraft off the carriers, including the USS Abraham Lincoln, have been accounted for. Something interesting, I started asking around, asking different intelligence officers, and I asked them, does this surprise you? Do you think there is credibility to that? And they mentioned something that they refer to as internal propaganda. They think it's highly likely that this could be some type of fabrication. That is the talk around here, and they said if indeed that there was a downed pilot, communications would be happening quickly, and that information would be getting out quickly, and we would have a sense for it here on the carrier if indeed there was validity to that story, Bill.
All right, Kira Phillips embedded on board the USS Lincoln back here in Kuwait. Quickly want to show you a portion of what appeared to be a 4-hour firefight outside of Qasr involving U.S. Marines on one side and the Iraqi soldiers on the other. Oftentimes this videotape that we took in a live video feed earlier today get caught quite graphic. Dust flying, bullets flying, tanks shooting shells as well. We're told that after about a 4-hour period, the U.S. Marines did accomplish their objectives and had moved on from that position again on the outskirts of Qasr. I want to remind you yet again that we are hearing throughout the U.S. military and the British military and also our embedded journalists that they say there are pockets of resistance that continue to pop up throughout the southern part of Iraq, yet more evidence today with that firefight that we watched live. Now to Leon Harris at the CNN Center for more. Leon, hello.
Yes, Bill. What I've got now is more information we've gotten from some of our embedded correspondents who have been calling in with confirmation that they have seen instances where Iraqi troops are using women and children as human shields on the battlefield. Now, this is something that U.S. war planners had anticipated. This is not much of a surprise, but this is something that is to be considered in their execution of their plans from here on out. So let's go now to Renee San Miguel and Brigadier General David Grange here at CNN headquarters to talk about what this is going to mean down the road. Gentlemen?
Yeah, Leon, thank you. We were going to talk a little bit about what was going on with the reports of the human shields, but first we want to bring everybody up to date on where the troops are in relation to what's going on with Nasiriyah. General David Grange joins me right now. Let's go ahead and just circle this on the map and let everybody know what's going on and why you think they are running into, what kind of resistance do you think that they are running into in Nasiriyah, the Marines?
Well, there's resistance from Iraqi units that are not that tough. In other words, the reputation is that they're robust. However, I think they're being influenced by either Republican Guard or paramilitary forces that have a way to persuade others to fight or put up resistance. Plus, again, using the civilians to help protect themselves from warfare between land warfare between two forces.
And the idea of also those human shields would keep close air support, what is known as close air support, but basically calling in fighter jets to come in and clear the way for the coalition ground troops.
Well, their intent is to negate some of the capabilities that coalition forces have. However, the coalition forces have a variety of means to overcome a problem like this.
Okay, and we won't talk about those because we don't want to give too much away. Let's talk about what parts of the Iraqi military may be using those human shields. The Fedayeen Saddam, an elite paramilitary unit, about 30 to 40,000 strong. What do we know about them?
Well, I think they've been sent throughout Iraq to where some of the weaker units are located in order to influence those not to surrender by fear of death. So they have fear of death in front of them, they have fear of death behind them. They're in a very tough situation, obviously, and I think a lot of these units would probably capitulate if you didn't have that kind of pressure, and that's a tactic used by Saddam's leadership in order to enforce these people to stay in place.
Okay, now we had heard reports that it was a Fedayeen Saddam, but also possibly units from the Republican Guard as well, and this is said to be 60 to 70,000 strong, and this is supposed to be the best of the best.
Well, the best that they have, and we don't know exactly who's doing this, but that's what they do. I mean, that's a tactic that they use others to reinforce. And if you look at any reports on the array of Iraqi forces throughout the theater, you usually have rank and file type units up front, behind them the hardcore units like the Republican Guard, the more trusted units to Saddam.
Picture it as some of the regular Iraqi army facing coalition troops, guns in front of them, and their own Iraqi guns from the Republican Guard and the Fedayeen Saddam behind them. They have no choice but to fight and also to use these human shields.
Right.
We also want to bring in Chad Myers, a CNN meteorologist at this point, to talk a little bit more about the weather and how that's going to affect. We understand that some sandstorms are possibly, some heavy sandstorms are heading the way. Chad?
Exactly. You know, we talked about and have been talking about the speed and how fast these guys are going, driving 16, 20 hours a day, and why. Well, the big story is a very unclassified, very large sandstorm in the making. Two storms coming together, one over Europe and one over Africa. They're coming over the eastern Mediterranean, phasing together as storms do sometimes over the east coast of the United States, called a nor'easter. Now, there isn't an ocean out here to make this thing even stronger, but there will be winds on the south, coming from the south, and also winds on the west of this thing, causing a lot of dust by Monday into Tuesday. There will also be an awful lot of wind behind it, even pushing the potential for some rain showers in the desert. That would help. A little bit of rain would keep some of the dust down, but the wind behind this cold front by Tuesday afternoon will in fact gust to over 50 miles per hour. That will certainly kick up the dust. An unclassified NASA picture we found this morning from Basra all the way back out to Kuwait City. You can see the oil field here. We talked to Christiane Amanpour a little bit ago about the 7 wells that are on fire. 150 miles, though, worth of smoke from those oil fields on the satellite. That was taken about 8 o'clock this morning. Those winds are obviously going to shift directions for tomorrow, head to the south to the north, and then from the west to the east. Back to you guys.
Myers with your battlefield forecast. Thank you very much, General. We have talked a lot about this, what the blowing sand does to equipment and weapons. Could this, bring things have been moving very rapidly so far. Could this bring things to a halt?
Weather always affects military operations, just like the enemy situation in the terrain. I think with the way the predominant direction of the winds, actually it's more favorable to coalition forces. And just looking back to 1991. Our forces, I think, operated every day regardless of the weather. It rained, there were sandstorms, and missions continued on. They may be adjusted, but the mission continues on.
The flexibility part of all this operation means maybe you use this to the coalition's advantage. Maybe the coalition uses this to its advantage.
Yeah, weather is an advantage to attacker and defender. And those that know how to take advantage of the environment, take advantage of nature, will prevail.
All right. General David Grange, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate your insight. Leon, back to you.
Renee, thank you, General. Now let's recap some of the developments that we've seen happen in the last few hours.
There was an officer in the 7th Cavalry here about the kind of resistance they're meeting. Taken prisoner. Another Iraqi was wounded at the time, and He was being treated at a field hospital. If you can stand by just a second, Charlie, can you...
3:33 a.m. CNN's Walter Rogers, traveling with the 3rd Squadron, 7th Cavalry, reports that a towering plume of smoke near the convoy is the result of coalition forces blowing up a large Iraqi ammunition dump. The 3/7th also captured 3 Iraqi troops traveling in a pickup truck. Then, 3:53 a.m. Eastern, CNN's Christian Amanpour reports some Iraqi oil wells are burning, but the more important oil-gas separation pumps are all intact, and the Rumaila oil fields are in coalition control. 5:15 a.m. The Iraqi vice president claims that Iraq is holding U.S. prisoners of war and will show them on television. U.S. Central Command says no American troops have been taken prisoner, but officials say later some American soldiers are missing in Iraq. 6:47 a.m. Arabic language networks begin airing video from Baghdad that shows Iraqi authorities searching for something in the Tigris River. There are reports that they're looking for a downed coalition pilot. Then at 9 a.m. Eastern, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld says that he's received reports of a missing aircraft. 7:08 a.m. CNN's Barbara Starr says the Pentagon confirms that a British Tornado aircraft was accidentally shot down Saturday by U.S. Patriot missiles as it returned from a mission over Iraq. Recovery efforts are underway, but there's little hope of finding any survivors there. Now, we're bringing you live coverage of the war in Iraq right here on CNN 24 hours a day. And when you're away from a television, there's always CNN.com. That's where you'll find our war tracker. Click on interactive maps there and keep track of the action on the front lines on your own computer. You can also read field reports from our reporters out there in the war zones. Once again, that is all at CNN.com. Now to Paula, standing by in New York. Paula.
I guess, Leon, we're not going to be getting away from the television set anytime soon today, are we?
I don't think so.
We're always looking to bank about 9 or 10 different monitors with stuff going on. Thanks, Leon. We have CNN correspondents posted around the region working to bring you full coverage of the war in Iraq. We leave you this picture now until we hit the top of the hour of downtown Baghdad. Although you can't clearly make it out in this shot, we have been watching rising columns of black smoke blanket the city. Some of the folks we've interviewed today from Baghdad describe that smoke as coming from ditches that the Iraqis have filled with oil and set on fire in an attempt to obscure coalition aircraft and coalition weapons. More right after this break.
If you've been investing in money funds, you've probably noticed your yields have slowed to a trickle. The Strong Ultra Short-Term Income Fund offers higher return potential and a 14-year history of proven performance. For an alternative to today's low yields, call 1-888-4STRONG. That's 1-888-4STRONG. We'll help you build a strong portfolio.
Good morning, welcome. 11 a.m. on the East Coast, 8 a.m. on the West. You're looking at a live picture of Baghdad, 7 p.m. there. Today is Sunday, March 23rd, the 4th day of the war in Iraq. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Paula Zahn in New York. Joining me this morning, Bill Hemmer in Kuwait City and Leon Harris in Atlanta, who gets things started with a look at what is happening at this hour. Leon?
All right, Paula, here are the latest developments at this hour. U.S. Marines are facing heavy resistance near the Iraqi city of Al-Nasiriyah. CNN's Alessio Vinci reports that the Marines have suffered some casualties. They entered the town after Iraqi forces ambushed a military convoy bringing supplies to coalition forces in the region there. The CNN's Walter Rogers reports an artillery barrage aimed at the 3/7th Cavalry has left a soldier wounded. He says that 3 shells landed about 75 yards away from the unit. Also, Rogers says that U.S. soldiers on a reconnaissance mission reported seeing members of the Iraqi Republican Guard hurting women and children.